Imagine successfully robbing the most secured museum in the world. And I'm not talking about the time Nicolas Cage took the Declaration of Independence. I'm talking about the recent robbery of the Louvre, which in this day and age seems pretty surprising because aren't we supposed to have the most advanced security in the world? And these are the most important and valuable pieces of art and history that arguably, at least Europe, has ever seen. So how were a bunch of thieves able to, in the middle of the day, come up, basically go through the window and take all of these crown jewels? Well, it's a really good question, especially when you learn more about the security involved. Things like a Wi-Fi password that was just Louvre and a really old Windows 2003 server that had trivial passwords like fails. So this makes us wonder, you can look secure, but it doesn't mean you are secure. And we're going to explore that today. Dustin, I have to ask you, when the password in the organization is the same as actually the organization's name, is that defense in depth or is that just defense in dumb at this point?
Yeah, it's like security through ridiculousness, right?
It really is.
It's amazing. Like we've seen this before in the past. I mean, gosh, we see this all the time. When we talked about this before, the Sony hack from, I think 2015, 2016 was a big one, right? Where the CEO's password was password. Like this just keeps happening. And it's not that we don't have good guidance on what you're supposed to be doing. We have great guidance on what you're supposed to be doing. And, there's always the argument, well, we can't do everything. Fine, but can you change your password? Like that seems like a relatively, or maybe just change the way you do authentication altogether. So it's not necessarily a password, it's a key ring or something like you have change, you have turnover. I get it. Insecurity personnel, although you would hope possibly not at the Louvre, but who knows? And so there's a lot of things that come to mind here, Frank, and a lot of things that we always talk about on this podcast. And one of those things is like the baseline of cybersecurity, the basic practices of cybersecurity, which is, asset management to some extent, know what you have.
Sometimes your assets are jewels.
Yeah, literal jewels.
Yeah.
I think one of the best memes I've seen about this so far is that it turns out that British and French museums now think that stealing items is a bad thing.
Oh, no kidding.
Because they're all made up of stolen items.
It's kind of very interesting. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure in that British one, what I went to, there were a lot of people thinking that they were stolen. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure the Rosetta Stone was found, not in Europe.
Not in Europe. Yeah. What was the Scottish stone, the King stone that they had that was in London for a really long time? Scottish people, I think there was a group of Scottish people who did go steal it back. And then.
Oh, really? Wait, what was the importance of the stone? Was it like Robert?
It was a stone that the
Scottish
kings they used to sit on while they were getting coronated, while they were getting crowned. Yeah. And so after Britain conquered Scotland, they took it and yeah, it was there. And great story. I think there's a movie on it with Ewan McGregor, I think. Anyway, great movie.
Wait,
Check
is
it
he
out.
Scottish?
I don't know the name. Huh?
Is he Scottish? I knew he was from the UK, I knew he was from the UK. I just didn't know if he was Scottish too.
It'd be funny if they had you're right. It'd be funny if they had a British guy play the main protagonist for the Scottish guy. Anyway,
I'm not saying, also Obi-Wan Kenobi was not British. So, if we're going to talk about, getting things right. Anyway, neither here nor there. Please continue, as I've now completely derailed you.
No, that's okay. I was actually just thinking about it. I was like, wait, Allen Guinness, he must have been Irish, right? But anyway, Alec Guinness.
No idea. Alec Guinness.
Yeah.
If Alec Guinness wasn't Irish, then, well, you know what? There's a lot of Guinness people here in the U.S., too, that are not Irish. I know a lot of people that drink Guinness that aren't Irish. And see, that's that terrible logic that leads people to steal stuff from other countries and put it in museums. So
it all connects.
Yep.
It all connects.
It all connects.
So this once again comes down to a basic cyber hygiene issue. I haven't read into it enough to know if this is a technique that the art thieves, utilized in order to gain access into spaces that they weren't supposed to gain access into. But I do know that this did come up in a security audit, I think, over a decade ago.
Spoiler alert. Yep.
Yeah. And so, this is one of those things where it's not just that you weren't doing baseline cyber hygiene practices. You didn't fix anything that you were told was wrong, which I think is amazing. And look, I've seen you and I have both seen, and I'll ask you about this in a second, Frank, but we've both seen organizations who they have other priorities. Fine. But there are certain things that probably shouldn't be overlooked. Frank, do you have any good examples of that or any?
Well, I've got some good examples from the example we're talking about. And I've got
let's
some
do
good
that then.
examples from other ones. Let's talk about this one though first. So there were things that you and I see often when we're doing cybersecurity evaluations of organizations. So for those of you that don't know, Dustin and I spend a lot of our time evaluating organizations, both either strategically or tactically through either, as Dustin runs vulnerability management programs and so forth, or myself, I look at the strategic implementation of controls that we find, and during these assessments, we find that there are often a lot of gaps in security, right? Either through something that needs to be patched or something that needs attention or something that needs to be written down. And it's always interesting because people love to do pen tests. At least clients love to have pen tests, for example, whether it is an inside a white box, right? White box meaning that there's full visibility and you can see it, or it's a black box where the attacker, the hired penetration testers don't see anything about it of the system and they just have to try and get in, or there's gray, which is somewhere in between where there's a little bit of information that the hackers or pen testers know in order to get going in the actual penetration test. These can also include physical assessments of the security as well in some penetration tests. It's not all the time, but it does happen. And Dustin and I have done both of those. And what I find interesting is that in this example, you've had evaluations by literal French cybersecurity agencies. It's like the ANSSI.
The NSA equivalent. Yep.
Yeah. I'm not going to try to pronounce French today, and I apologize because I've tried it before.
Louvre will be the extent of it.
I don't know when you say the R or if you say the R in Louvre. But anyway, which is funny because I got that DNA test and apparently there's some French in me. So who knew? Anyway, all that to say, these physical aspects of the penetration tests include evaluations of basic things, earned styles for, do you badge in? Where do you badge in? Is there a back door? When people come in that back door, how does it look? The evaluation of the Louvre found open roof access. Open roof access, meaning if you got to the roof or if you wanted to go to the roof, you could. There is no security in the way keeping you from doing that. Now, I find that also interesting because why'd they break through the window if they could just get in from the roof real easy? Now, I'm not advocating any kind of parachute style robbery. However, that said, this is pretty close to Blockbuster at this point. The only thing that you needed to make this more of a Netflix series was parachuting into the Louvre's, ceiling and then just going through the door. But there were problems such as that. Then, the one that everyone knows about now is the Wi-Fi password to the security system and to the surveillance system was Louvre. And they had a very outdated Windows server, all of which that apparently when they were reassessed a year later, a lot of the same vulnerabilities were there, right? And so this is a really long answer to your question. I see this often, right? Because everyone wants to do the pen test and find out where the security flaws are. No one wants to take responsibility for addressing them. Why? Because it's boring. It's all so boring. And I'll tell you how that works because you can say, well, no, some of them are pretty cool, Frank. Do some patching for an organization because know what you can't do? Just push a patch out. You have to coordinate the patch push out. You have to test the patch to make sure that it doesn't break any systems. You have to document all of your efforts while doing this so that if you do then push the patch out greater to the system, you have documented proof showing that, hey, it didn't break when we tested it, because if it does break something, then someone's going to come looking for you. You need to do a lot of work that is not fun and is pretty boring, like brushing teeth and taking out the garbage, but it has to be done. So what I found often is that and then companies can do this for you. But a lot of instances, organizations that have these services done to them will pay for the penetration test, but not necessarily for the remediation stuff. Or they think they can do the remediation, and they can with the staff that they have, it's just the staff doesn't do it. There's a lot of reasons for this. But the big one I found often is that it's boring. No one likes a register of actions to do, prioritized by key risk levels and so forth. It's not fun, but it comes down to whenever anyone says, I don't like this, it's not called show friends, it's called show business, right? And same thing with cyber, right? It's not just cyber and friends. I would love to do cyber and friends. You and I got to do cyber and friends for a while there back in one of our old jobs. It was just fun. But it's cybersecurity is a business now and we're all adults. So I think that was the big thing that happened here. Also, I see the assessment that took place, and this is what I want to know your opinion on because you, doctor, have done a great deal of research on these things. The assessment, when I looked at the findings that have been released in the media of them failing assessments, I couldn't see any specific framework that was applied. Where with some of these frameworks, there's serious consequences where if you don't actually take action, it can result in serious issues. And I know GDPR is a law, but I'll reference it in the same breath, right? A great example there. But also ISO 27001, right? You can't get certified. Even SOC accreditation, which is separate from necessarily substantial physical things like Windows security. But I find it interesting that 1, the assessment was done, 2, they found the same problems later, and 3, there was no, I guess, stick to actually encourage them to make the changes. I didn't see anything in my research of people being fired because the changes weren't made. I'm sure someone's fired now. I hope someone's fired now.
Maybe.
Do I hope someone's fired now? I don't know. We don't even know if the job existed. Who knows? So I also have a bunch of conspiracy theories on this as well. I mean, after 5 days,
definitely want to hear those.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Let's get to those. Yeah.
But I want to ask you, you've done all this research with frameworks and so forth. I've watched you do it. I've read about a framework once. And I'm very curious, do you think this was a failing of the museum, the mechanisms being used to perform the assessment, the assessors, or a combination all therein?
I don't know if I can blame the assessors because it seems like they were pointing out such easy things or such basic things that it was like, we can't even go any deeper with you guys until we get this whole thing figured out, right?
Basic from our perspective, though. I'll say that too. Basic from our perspective. Think of the people that we usually deliver these reports to or share this information with. It's either like an executive who, I appreciate executives, but they don't always have a fully informed understanding of cybersecurity. Let's put it that way. Or an overwhelmed IT chief who the last thing they want to do is have to do more work because they're not funded well enough and don't have enough people already. So, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it was the assessor's fault, but maybe could it have been a delivery issue in that regard then?
Could have been, but it sounds like they still knew about it 20 or 13 years later, however long it's been. It seems like
13 years. Yeah.
It seems like they knew and that it was communicated. So that's part one, at least at this level, right? And so this is the only level we know about. Me thinking about this from this perspective is that if they had this many problems at the beginning of are you guys practicing good password hygiene? The answer is no. Okay, let's start, square one. Practice good cyber hygiene. Like you said, there's plenty of guidance out there, right? On that note, though, the guidance that's given might not be the most straightforward. You're absolutely right about that. Some people have a hard time understanding what's going on. And then adding into that, the third part to what you were talking about, which is is there something going on with the personnel at the Louvre or just at any organization, right? And so what we tend to find and what we've empirically proven is that a lot of the people in an organization who take over cybersecurity roles are not cybersecurity people. And also it might not be their only job. They might be IT plus cyber. They might be COO plus cyber. They might be, Salesforce engineer plus cyber.
We've seen it. We've seen it.
That before, right?
And never forget that one.
It's maddening. And so you have, for the most part, if you're an expert, an SME in cybersecurity, from the data that I have seen and I've collected, which needs further validation, by the way, from the data that I collected.
I feel like it's a bit more validated than some other data sets, but yes, continue. Please continue. If it got you a doctorate, it's at least okay.
It has been reviewed to an extent. Sure, but further studies need to happen, right? So that's an important thing. It's an important distinction to make. From what I've seen from my data is that if you are a subject matter expert, if you're at the C-suite level or just executive level, or just you're in charge of cybersecurity for an organization, you feel comfortable that what's written down in a framework or standard is something that you can execute on, that you can apply in the field, right? That's important. The problem with that is that not everybody's a cybersecurity expert, right? And we, in the United States, we try with things like NIST CSF to say, here's some very basic, non-prescriptive things to go after. Now, don't get me wrong, they're still technical. They're still, you got to be like, wow, what's if you've never seen this before, you're going to be like, what's that? And how do I dive into that? Right. And you will have to dive into it. And if you don't like doing it, then you're absolutely right. It's boring. It's boring as hell. We've had this conversation before where I've had students who are like, I hate looking at packets in Wireshark. And I was like, you are in the wrong field then.
Maybe consider something else. And I will say on that note, you can be in cyber and be bored with parts of cyber though too. Like when we did our wireless stuff, that was the bee's knees. I literally remember thinking to myself, these are the good old days right now. I need to remember this right now because when I'm old and I'm doing, big cyber maturity assessments, GRC. I didn't know what they were called at the time. Yeah, GRC. Remember this. Know that you appreciated it at the time when you were doing it. And I've got to tell you, I've felt that more than once. I know exactly where I was, and I can tell you what water fountain I was looking at outside of what building and all that stuff. So I'm not saying that I hate the GRC element, because I don't hate the GRC element. It's like, I find this, and correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'm wrong. But I find in a lot of career fields that it's really fun. If you love what you do, it's really fun at the start. But if you want to excel in the field and grow and move upward, right? You're going to have to start doing what I like to call the boring shit, right? You're going to have to start doing the managing things, the documenting things. You're going to have to figure out how to communicate with executives over stuff like that is really cool here. You have to make it understandable up here. And it's the borification of information all the way up, making it completely dry, but understandable and digestible for different audiences. I'm not saying that's every career field. Like, for example, did you know there's a gathering of hobos every year? Like, hobo apparently is a job. It's out in Iowa or Idaho, one of the I states, but they come together every year and they have a big convention of hoboism, and they talk about new tricks they learned to be hobos. And they just, when they're done, they all just get on different trains and ride the rails. Now, this is a career. Should we define this as a career field and you love it and it's your bliss? I think that's it for life. Like, you don't have to worry about upward mobility.
No.
Just unless your upward mobility is going north on Alaskan train lines to go. Yeah, right. But I find that in a lot of career fields. If you want to go further, you have to get a bit more boring. That said, if you don't like packets at the start, you're really going to hate your life moving forward. So yes.
But you might be right, though. Like, look, GRC is never anybody's favorite until an auditor comes around. And then if you've done it properly, then it's a lot of,
then you feel
I wouldn't say
good.
It's fun, but it's done, right? You're just like, here you go, Mr. or Mrs. Auditor. Thank you so much. And they'll say, thank you. And here's your A+ or whatever it is you get, right? Here's your attestation letter. And so there's definitely part to that. And yeah, you're right. I guess I shouldn't be so hard on people, but I do have to say that in order to be able to like dive deep into something, so let's say you even are in GRC. Let's say you didn't like doing the packet stuff, but you got in GRC and it really, gets your rocks off. So
really pumps your packets.
Really pumps your packets. That's right. So when it comes down to then looking at something that comes up on a GRC report and being like, well, what's this thing over here? And to have someone explain it to you and be like, oh yeah, I never really did that because I didn't like it, or I didn't, I don't really understand how this works. But, you go and do the patching thing. Yeah, that might work. If you get asked to explain it any more than that, then, you probably won't get asked to explain it any more than that. But if you don't inherently understand what's kind of going on in the background, then do you really understand what's going on? And that's like kind of a big deal when it comes to cybersecurity in general. So if you don't understand the need to have a secure Wi-Fi password, why change it? And now here we are from 2013 to 2025. And the Wi-Fi password is still Louvre for the Louvre, right?
I love that example, especially because you and I have met people in the field of cybersecurity who have never touched packets, but somehow have become cybersecurity leaders, right? So like when they get those results and then they're asked to fix them, it's not that they don't even necessarily want to fix them. It's that they don't even know how to fix them. And that then speaks to your other point. In a lot of situations, you only have to give a really bad answer once before people stop asking you questions. Like if you don't want people asking you questions anymore, just give the worst answers, right? Then they'll leave you alone. Now, I don't know if that looks great for long-term career prospects, but it's, maybe a different lens to look through. And I know that Dustin, you and myself as well have made it part of our mission in our career to help people figure out early what they like in cyber, if they do like cyber, and to make sure they eat some packets at some point so that they can say they have worked with packets. They know the lifeblood of the internet.
Absolutely. There's another part to this too, which I think, we're going to have some of our 3 listeners who are going to say, well, going to be kind of Steve Jobs-ish about it, right? Well, Steve Jobs didn't know how to build an iPhone, but he put together the team that built the iPhone. And in an executive level, job role, that's all you have. You just have to build a team. You have to have the team that knows how to do things. Fair enough to an extent. Steve Jobs also was inside of a garage at one point soldering
with Steve Wozniak, no less. I feel like if you spend enough time standing next to Steve Wozniak, you'll at least understand some computer.
So at some point, Steve Jobs did understand computer to that point, right? And on a more visceral level than even we might understand it today, because they were still doing like the Altera was like the big thing back then, right before the Apple came out. And so, on that note, you still need to understand on some kind of level what's going on here. If you're a good person in business, great. Then you can probably look at processes and probably dive into those and work on processes, procedures, work on governance and risk. You get those aspects of it. If you don't understand how the governance can be applied or the risk can be calculated properly, now you're in trouble. And if you don't understand how computers work, now you're really in trouble. And networking, now you're really in trouble. So yes, you can hire the right people to help you understand and help you interpret things. However, if you want, I would hate to be in a job where I didn't know what the hell was going on. Let me just put it that way. And I think
agree.
there are people out there that can stand that, and good for you. But your crown jewels might get stolen in 13 years if you don't change something.
And the add on to that, I've been in jobs where I don't know what's going on before, and I was pretty miserable. But it wasn't until I took the time to really understand job that I was like, wait a second. Oh, I get it now. And then I finally figured out what it was. And I actually, to come to find out, I liked cybersecurity. And that's a true story. When I was hired to do cybersecurity the first time, I could spell it. Actually, I don't even know if the word cybersecurity existed yet. I know cyber did, and I know security did. It was like information security.
Information security or like network security, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no clue. I mean, I was with some of the people we know that the computer, was just mythical to them. And in fact, I will always say thank you to you. I mean, by 2012, for example, I knew how computers worked and all that, but I'd still never built one. And you gave me the encouragement and the courage to build one too, which if any of you are ever thinking about it, at least once or twice in your life, I recommend building your own computer, even if it's something small, like setting up a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, those are great.
But if you do set up a Raspberry Pi, there's a lot of fun modules. It makes it easier to learn too. That said, I want to talk about the framework aspect a little bit more. You and I work with the NIST CSF framework a lot, which is govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And I'm pretty sure this robbery shows a great example of how they failed every single domain, right? Every single function. As far as govern, they clearly didn't have anything written down to follow that was good enough to do or was being executed. As far as identify, while things were identified and they knew their assets and even they were aware of it, they weren't able to keep track of them. The protect, well, they certainly didn't lock the window well enough and they certainly didn't protect things well enough. The detect, they even detected incidents. They even detected the vulnerabilities, but they didn't act. As far as the response, this is where I'm going to take a minute to go off on a tangent. They didn't respond fast enough and it took days. And then recover, well, they still haven't recovered the jewels. And I want to talk about response and recover. And I am not a conspiracy theorist. However, I would like to think that Dustin, as self-aware people who have eyeballs and ears and intake data with this amount of time, still not dead. Thank God, right? Still not dead. We would have, if we were to conduct some type of heist, we would have left the country within 5 days.
Yeah.
Like we would have been gone. So this whole idea that they found a bunch of the robbers 5 days later and they're still finding some more, but they still can't find the jewels. I don't know if these are the actual robbers.
Okay.
I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
Or maybe there was one robber who convinced everyone else. Now what we really need to do is lay low for 5 days and took all them jewels and pieced out to parts unknown at this point. Probably in Moravia. Right, fleeing from Superman. For anyone who's seen that, that's a fun joke. Anyway, I'm not sure I buy in all on that. And recover, okay, it's cool that you call it the thieves, but it's real convenient to be like, but we'll probably never recover the jewels, right? That just tells me I don't think you got the real thieves, or you at least didn't get enough thieves because someone knows where those jewels are and would like to not be rotting in a French prison for the rest of their lives. So. I don't know.
Prison.
That's my thought there. But okay, back to the actual domains and all that stuff. Do you think that if they had adopted a framework, and we don't know, maybe they did, but if they adopted and observed the framework more competently, that this could have been avoided? And what would it have taken to observe a maturity framework appropriately in this instance?
Yeah, so two things kind of come to mind with this. One is that they may have followed some kind of framework. And we see this a lot, even today, even with a lot of the organizations that we work with. Detect is like solid. Everybody can detect something happening, right? I'm going to guess that there were detection mechanisms in place at the Louvre. If something was taken, if, something shakes too much, if there's too loud of a sound, they have these kinds of capabilities within a museum, as far as I know, right? So let's say that they do, and we see this a lot in cybersecurity, where you've got an MDR provider, right? You've got someone's going to detect, and then I think a lot of people bank on detect. I think they bank on it, and they're like, well, we got it. We can see if it happens. And if we see it, we'll just send somebody over there and tell them to go fix it, right? And it's like, but where's your real plan for this whole thing? What if that person is sick that day? What if they fell asleep? What if, where's the call chain here, right? And that's where we start talking about respond, but also governance, right? That's where a lot of these things come into place. So there's that. The other part that's interesting that you mentioned earlier, and this goes a little bit off topic of what you asked me, but, finding the guys, right? So attribution within cybersecurity is like, I don't want to say it's non-existent, but it's really hard.
Yes, it is
because
really
you can
hard.
spoof things. You can and the same thing goes for physical capabilities, right? So physical vulnerabilities are a part of cybersecurity. And that's something that most cyber people know. It's funny that the other way doesn't really transfer both ways.
Yeah.
Wherein a physical security expert might not know a whole lot about cybersecurity, but a cybersecurity expert is at least going to know a little bit about physical security.
I have found cybersecurity experts know more about physical security than physical security experts know about cybersecurity, in my experience.
Yes, same thing here.
I do want to, before we go too far away from that, talk about the attribution and the difficulty of attribution within cybersecurity. And that is, I'm not even going to say that's a double-edged sword. That's just a sword that hurts and cuts everyone.
It's a sword that stabs you.
Here's what's really frustrating to me with the whole attribution question, and everyone sees it, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, and it's happening more and more. You have cybersecurity insurance providers who are taking advantage of the difficulty of attribution. And what they're now doing with a lot of these cybersecurity policies for these companies is they are saying, we will not cover an incident that you might experience if it can be potentially attributed to an advanced persistent threat, an APT actor.
Yeah.
And the thing that drives me nuts and up the wall is APTs, and for those of you who don't understand what advanced persistent threat actors are, these are individuals and organizations that are probably state funded. They have enough finances to be an organized operation to persistently, that's where the persistent comes from, through the use of advanced, in theory, capabilities, exploit an organization and so forth. I see APTs as just like everything else, in my experience. They will use whatever works and whatever they have at hand in order to exploit an organization. And that oftentimes includes basic stuff like Nmap scans and things like that, which any attacker is going to use. And as a result, you'll see a lot of these claims that are being rejected because they're like, but we saw an APT do this once. That's some BS right there. And just at this point, if you're one of those insurance providing companies, just say, we just want you to pay us a subscription just cause, right? Because that is no reason to not provide the insurance coverage that's being provided. On that, further though, so as you're saying, it's really hard to catch those, and I agree. Do you think that if they had observed, I mean, we talked about observing a framework. You're right. If you observe the framework, it can be helpful, but it has to be done in a different way. Also, and it has to be taken seriously. And none of our clients, naturally, because our clients are amazing, and I think we just luck out all the time, Dustin. You see some organizations that if they pay for MDR, they just view it as a silver bullet and say, well, I've paid it. I'm done. Right? I don't have to worry about cybersecurity anymore because they just want to view it as something they no longer have to think about. Right. And to that end, I can understand that is a very seductive inclination for these organizations. However, I would strongly encourage and warn organizations not to do that, specifically because if you just think you can pay for something and not worry about it in the field of cyber anymore, you've missed kind of the point. It is an enablement capability. You still need someone to help, for example, guide the implementation, the rollout of a capability, of a service, of an endpoint monitoring solution, things along those lines. And if you don't have that, at least one person in your organization who's responsible of that, it doesn't matter how many things you pay for, they're not going to be implemented appropriately, and you're just going to have this false sense of security.
Yeah, risk transference is a thing. It's a term. I don't usually buy into it. And look, I know that, for the business people out there, they're like, no, you can do that. When it comes to agreements with cloud providers, with MDR, with MSS providers, with really any kind of technical provider, usually there still is quite a bit of responsibility that you have as the client for the security and privacy of your data. And that's something that needs to be paid special attention to. Yeah. And so if you are in charge of the security of something, you still need to make sure that you're understanding where your responsibilities start and end when it comes to any kind of vendor, right? And you totally hit on exactly what I was talking about earlier, Frank, which is people bank on the detect part. They're just like, yep, we got the detection in place. Great. So if you think about this like a house or like a museum, where you can tell if somebody opens a door, even remotely, and say, oh no, someone's broken into my house. If you don't have a plan and you don't have any kind of protections in place, then you have to answer to not just whatever gets stolen and whoever's property gets stolen out of you also have to answer a question to the police as to why you didn't lock the door, and your insurance as to why you didn't lock the door.
And you're right on that, because you're getting to a bigger point of accountability there for why and who. We've got multiple agencies that assumed each other would act here, right? Yeah. Multiple different parts of work that assumed there was, I guess you could call it governance diffusion, in that there was no single accountability. And on top of it all, there was leadership turnover. There was a new director in 2021 who acknowledged the issues, but then didn't have the funding. So I've got kind of two questions there, right?
Changing a Wi-Fi password is free. Sorry.
I agree.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about the human factor, though, and the actual legacy tech. When you have a government organization that's relying upon a bunch of legacy tech that requires a lot of funding to fix, what do they do in that situation? And as it connects with the individuals who are doing it, the actions that were not taken here, do you view that then as lack of funding? Do you view it as, a case of governance failure? Is it something deeper? I mean, could it be a resistance to just modernization in this instance? I mean, everything in there's old as all get out, right? And they don't really scream modern, which I've always found the Louvre to be a juxtaposition of the ancient antiquity and the most modern, up-to-date security, but yes, not, right? So do you think that this was primarily a funding and attribution issue, and that you just have so much legacy tech and not enough money to update it? And do you think there's any kind of resistance here to make significant change because, there's just an overall resistance to security as well?
So two things. The first part, defense in depth is the answer. So yes, we run pen tests and we do vulnerability assessments all the time on organizations that have Windows 2012 servers. Sometimes even Windows XP boxes somewhere on the network, right? Because it's running a legacy piece of software. I'm going to cost $12 million to rewrite that legacy piece of software that is currently at the core of their database/data processing capabilities. Fine. There's defense in depth you can do. There's extra protections you can do to put those on. Usually those extra protections, and this bleeds into the second part, and this goes right back to what we were talking about before, where if you don't really understand what a packet is or how cybersecurity works, and then you're placed in a position where it's like, well, you guys need to have like firewalls and stuff like that, and you don't know what you're doing, you got to hire somebody who does know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Which fine, hire somebody who does know what they're doing. But if you still don't get it, then, so here's the thing. There are free everything out there. There's open source and free everything.
There are free everything out there. That's
so
true.
So when it comes to software and cybersecurity, so look, if you don't
I think that's what we were assuming, but now you just sent me on a whole other direction. But please continue.
Yeah. So if you don't have a good firewall, but you have an old computer sitting around somewhere, guess what? You can install PFSense on that old computer, buddy, and there you go. You got yourself a pretty high-functioning firewall.
If you don't, sorry, I like it, but I don't miss it because every now and then,
I'm not saying it's the easiest or the most comprehensive.
I'm like, I think I either just made a rule to prohibit this, but I also might have actually just denied it. And I feel like the GUI just could be a little more helpful. That said, I haven't touched it in about 5 years.
But that's the thing is that, understanding how those things work would help you find, oh, wait, there is this free thing. It wouldn't be the best that you could implement, but it would be very cheap to implement. And
there's tools out there to help you learn how to do it faster now as well. Just, this is not a plug at all, but I used Atlas for the first time this week. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I like about Atlas, ChatGPT's new browser, is if I'm looking at something and I have no idea what I'm looking at, which, I don't know, maybe say a web GUI or a web interface to a firewall, you can just pull up the thing and say, I don't know what to do. Here's what I'm trying to do. Help. And it'll give you a step-by-step to at least help you partially implement.
Similar thing with Cursor, right? Cursor can do some similar functionalities, right? And so we do have these AI tools, which, hey, look, Frank and I are actually talking about utilizing AI in an appropriate manner that you can...
Healthy manner.
In a healthy manner that you can implement some cybersecurity functionality in your organization. There are free detection capabilities out there. Snort. There's Security Onion. There is, I think...
I missed Security Onion. It had everything.
Wuzza?
Yeah.
Wuzza is the endpoint. The free endpoint thing. So look, you have for patching and for vulnerability scanning. There's OpenVAS. None of these are great. They are all free, so you do get what you pay for. But
and
guess
they are
what?
kind of fun though too. They're kind of fun. I like OpenVAS.
They're fun, and you learn, right? So they're not nothing. So when it comes to these fundamental capabilities, there's always open source options out there. Again, yes, it's going to cost a little bit of money because you're going to need some kind of hardware to run some of these things.
And people. Person is needed.
But as Frank just pointed out, there is some AI capabilities out here. Now, there's a lot that goes into this, and I understand there's some people out there shaking their heads and being like, you guys are talking about some crazy... But again, it is better than nothing, okay? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it needs to replace modern SOCs. It's not going to replace...
do not replace modern SOC with open source capabilities. No. Please do not do that.
Yeah, no. But if you don't have anything, including funding...
But if you have nothing, you actually do have something.
Yeah, that's right.
Just Not just the beauty within you, but open source software.
That's right. And so
Okay.
that's
Go ahead.
the 2 points right there, right? That's where it comes down to, is that, there are options out there for organizations who need help or who need to be able to cut costs somewhere. But, and then there's also a prioritization thing here that needs to happen, right? And me saying this, I'm sure there's going to be a CEO listening to this and be like, well, Dustin Brewer just said that you can do all this with open source software, so you're just going to cut your budget, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. Again,
make sure to quote him directly when you say that too, and be like, and then don't forget, he's a doctor. When you tell your employees, say, well, there's a cyber doctor.
And that's how my PhD got revoked.
Can they do that?
I don't know. Didn't they take someone's PhD
Our
away
PhD,
recently?
can you take away, like, is it like a cop where they're like, give me your badge and gun? It's like, give me your dissertation and hope. But I don't know. Like,
I think they can roll back like a.
You can
I don't know. They can roll back a degree.
You can disbar a lawyer, but can you take away a doctorate? Jurisprudence? I don't know what it's called. Doctorate. I have a cyber lawyer who wants to come on an episode. Side note. It's going to be fun.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, we're going to find out if you can lose your doctorate, if we can report you to the board of doctors. So I think there's a lot to take away from this, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing that no one is... The thing I like to take away most from this is, okay, the 5-year-old in me, like the little kid in me, who thought that we would never see cool heists. I loved The Italian Job growing up, right? I thought that was great. Like, I remember that movie came out. I was like, that's amazing. They stole all this stuff and got to drive Mini Coopers, right? I do not support theft, robbery, or as the French call it, banditry in this case, but I thought it was really like exciting to be like, wow, neat, things like this still happen. I hope they're caught. But we are also really learning from this instance that you can appear to be as secure as possible. You can appear to have a great sense of security or cybersecurity. That doesn't mean it's true. And just like so many things in life, look, I understand imposter syndrome. I understand fake till you make it. That's good. But at some point, you're also going to have to do things. Mm-hmm. I think the problem that the Louvre had is nobody actually did enough of those things. Right. So it's not just a story about missing jewels and stuff. It's also a great story, an example of, putting in appropriate governance, making sure things are managed appropriately, following a framework, and knowing that multi-factor authentication isn't just 2 random Frenchmen guarding some stuff in a shrug, right? It's going to be, bro, Leonardo da Vinci probably had better Wi-Fi passwords than these guys.
He did.
Yeah, right?
Because he didn't have any Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Whoa, there we go. Leonardo da Vinci had better wireless security than the Louvre just by not having it.
There you go.
Peak right there. All right, we got to end there because we're brilliant. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Legitimate Cybersecurity, where we're still trying to think of a catchphrase that we're putting together at some point. Anyway, until next week, stay safe, stay secure, and we will talk to you then.
Keep on cybering.
Yeah, keep on cybering.